Hello and welcome to today's Power of Knowing webinar, How Volunteering Can Change You and Even the World. Understanding comes from knowing. Volunteering provides many benefits for the volunteer and for the recipient of the volunteer service. Volunteering is at the very core of being human. No one has made it through without someone else's help. This webinar will discuss volunteer opportunities at AuthoriCare Collective, how to become involved, and how you may benefit from the experience. Power of Knowing is a free webinar series created by AuthoriCare Collective, which empowers people to be active participants in their care journey, enabling them to live on their own terms through personalized support for mind, body, and spirit. Please, to get us started, welcome our moderator, Risa Hanau. Risa serves as clinical and community educator at AuthoriCare Collective and is also a member of the Cone Health Ethics Committee. She's a licensed clinical social worker. Risa, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Paul. It is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. First, Danielle Crosby. Danielle is an instructional designer with NC A&T University. She holds a BA in economics from NC A&T University and an MED from University of Phoenix. Ms. Crosby has nearly 20 years of teaching experience working with young students. The highlight of her teaching profession is helping students learn about the endless opportunities to continue their educational growth and building positive relationships. For the past 6 years, she has been a very active volunteer with AuthoriCare Collective. Welcome, Danielle. And also joining us is Teresa Pendergrass. Teresa is the Director of Volunteer Services and Integrated Personalized Support. Her career at AuthoriCare Collective began as a volunteer coordinator, where she worked directly with volunteers in several areas of our organization. Though her background is in working with developmental disabilities, hospice has definitely become her passion. Welcome. And welcome to our participants. We would love to get to know just a little bit about who is joining us today. And so we have 2 polling questions that will come up on your Zoom screen. The first one is asking who is joining us? What roles do you fill? This is anonymous and it is multiple choice. So go ahead and select. We have those who are patients, we are caregivers, advocates, healthcare professionals, human service professionals, spiritual care guides. We know that many of us serve many different roles at the same time. And we also would love to know how many people are volunteers. We know that there are so many opportunities in our community to be a volunteer, and we would love to know who is joining us that is currently volunteering. So thank you for participating in this poll. Not surprisingly, we have amongst our participants a very wide selection, many caregivers, many advocates and healthcare professionals, along with our human service professionals and spiritual guides. We are representative of our community on today's call. And then looking at who is volunteering currently, about 1/3 of us on this call are currently involved in volunteering, which is fabulous. And maybe we'll add a couple of people and get you excited about volunteering as we continue with our conversation. So thank you for participating in that poll. As we start our conversation today, I want to invite everyone to make use of the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. You can type a question at any time, and then we will do our best to answer that question in the course of our time together. So as we begin, I think, Teresa, the best place for us to start is if you can give us an overview of what are the benefits of volunteering? Why is this good for us? Including how does it affect my personal wellness?
That's a great place to start. And sometimes it's a little hard when we think about, the obvious is to give back to patients and families, but there are many other types of benefits. Some studies would even suggest that it's good for your health, might even lower your blood pressure. Helps you understand hospice, of course, as you go through the volunteer training experience and being a volunteer. It can expand your perspective and understand, as you'll learn later in this webinar, that you're not just sitting with a patient that's waiting to pass. You can gain some potential job experience. We have had volunteers become some of our very best staff. You could discover that you like this work, and it could be a career choice or even a change. And learn about the services we provide, assist in guiding others, and some can even say that it would provide you with a sense of purpose or center for yourself.
And we know that certainly AthoriCare Collective has many volunteer opportunities, and we know that the communities that we all live in are rich with many different options for volunteering. And I know that you're connected with lots of different options for people that volunteer, not just with us at AthoriCare, but many other organizations.
Yes. Of course, companionship is always the number one request. It helps patients and caregivers so much. But we do have so many different opportunities at AthoriCare Collective. We have our IPUs where we do visit some patients, but we also sit at the front desk in our welcome center to have a friendly face as you come in, somebody to guide you and maybe answer any questions when you first get there. We have pet therapists that come in to our IPUs and some of our facilities. These are fully trained pets that are completely safe for the patient and family. You can run patient errands. Sometimes they just need their groceries to be picked up. Maybe some type of thing as easy as we have a volunteer that goes out just to take the trash can to the road, because that's all the patient really needs is somebody to take it and come back the next day and bring it in. Little things like that you might not think of but are so helpful for the patient. Transportation for our patients that still have doctor's appointments or need to go see a loved one at one of our IPUs. We provide that transportation. And then administrative. We have volunteers in various different settings in the office. They do data entry or anything as much as putting packets together for our other programs. There's just a wide variety of things they can do administratively. We have the Kids Path Garden in Greensboro. We have volunteers that have been gardeners for years and help that beauty come through. And then we have volunteers that even bake cakes or bring flowers or balloons for a patient as requested. And those birthday cakes mean so much because it may be their last one and the family wants it to be very special. We also have events and outreach. Our outreach coordinators will send us a request that we have an event coming up and can you sit at the table and hand out our programs, talk about volunteers a little bit and what it means to you. And then we have all kinds of activities throughout the organization. Our events at the Lusk, you would be able to sit at the desk and guide people in, log them in, maybe give them a little sticker badge. And then we have activities for Kids Path, such as our Camp Cardinal or our Memory Bear, which does require some sewing. And we have wonderful groups that do those as well. So there is such a variety that you can do. And we may get requests that we've never heard of, and we let you know those as well. So you can pick and choose what you'd like to do.
Thank you. And I want to make sure as we think about our organization, you made mention of IPU, and we know that that's our inpatient unit. So we have two different inpatient hospice facilities. We have one in Greensboro on Summit Avenue, and then our other One is in Burlington on Chapel Hill Road. And so when we think about IPU, that's just our abbreviation for inpatient units, which are our hospice houses, if you will. And then you mentioned the Lusk Center, which here in our Greensboro AthoraCare campus is where we often have many educational opportunities. So just as we begin our conversation, we see that our organization makes wide and broad use of volunteers. And I think, Danielle, your story is one that in some ways is very unique, and in other ways actually is very familiar, because you became familiar with our organization when your husband was one of our patients.
Yes.
And that was how you came to know us. And then over the years, you decided to come and be a volunteer with us. And if you could share sort of your journey, how you went from being a recipient of care to making the decision to be a volunteer, and what you're currently doing with us as a volunteer.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. So 10 years ago, I was 31 years old. And at that particular time, my husband was battling cancer. He had a pretty fairly long cancer battle of 6 years. At the time in the summer of 2013, his cancer progressed to stage 4. Now, the doctors, they told us, hey, I think you should really look into hospice care. That was the name at the time. Matter of fact, I got an attitude with the doctor. I was like, how dare you recommend hospice care for my husband? Because I had very negative views of the organization, views of, this is it, kick out hope, kick out, any inkling of goodness, just kicking on out. So for a while, I want to say at least a month and a half, my late husband and myself, we went back and forth, thinking about, should we do this? And every time we would go to the doctor was, just very simple, very sweet man. He would say, just, give it a try, give it a try. Well, the nurse came out to our home and explained hospice services to us, and we were hooked. It was the furthest thing from doom. And what I mean by that is the services that were provided, it was mostly through volunteers. And to be able to have support before the transition of a loved one, during the absolute time of transitioning, and then afterwards, myself and my family, we took advantage of hospice services such as the grief counseling, especially my daughter. Now, how I got into volunteering came much years later, but for me, for a very long time, I was still to this day, very grateful for the services that was provided for my family, from the memory bears to the grief counseling sessions to the snacks that was provided to my child. Because we know as parents, when we pick up our children from school, we ask them, hey, how's your day? What did you learn in school today? They say absolutely nothing. But the one question they ask you as a parent, do you have anything to eat? And I'm like, that's all you think about? That's all you think about. So my daughter was able to receive Kids Path counseling services and to have a snack upon arrival, because that's important to a child. And to know that a lot of those snacks are donated through volunteers. And I'm like, okay, I'm seeing things here. So for the first couple of years after the passing of my husband, I was one of those people where, hey, when there's the United Way campaign, make for sure you designate your money for, hospice care at this time. I was introduced to the volunteer the services through the local school system had a service learning camp. I didn't have hospice on my mind. I was going to make a little bit of extra money during the summer. And with this particular camp, the teachers were assigned to a United Way partner they gave me hospice. They didn't even know my past story. And I was like, okay, this is going to be very interesting. So throughout summer of 2016, I learned so much about hospice, and I actually fell in love with hospice, where I was able to understand the ins and the outs and the value of volunteers. So after that program ended, I actually called up to volunteer services, sat down, and explained how I wanted to continue the volunteer program with the teenagers. I do have a background in education. I have worked with students for over 20 years, from elementary, middle to high school. And I'm like, I can see, one thing that I know that I'm good at teaching. So I wanted to be able to bring my skill of teaching to volunteer services. Believe it or not, the sky is the limit when it comes to the different volunteer opportunities here at AuthorCare. So I was able to create a program, build upon a program with the students that I was currently teaching. I was able to incorporate them in helping to volunteer at hospice. So it was a joint effort from building upon my educational experience, my passion for teaching and for students, and also of gratitude for the work and the services that hospice provided to my family.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I know that we have many volunteers who benefited from our services, as you explain. And then there are other people who join us for any number of other reasons. And Teresa, when we think about, my health can be improved, I can be less socially isolated when I volunteer. If we think about volunteering at any organization that we might go to, talk to us about some of the things, the benefits that you've heard about, being a volunteer is wonderful because.
And we get that a lot. And when Danielle came to us in 2019 and we expanded our teen program, the first year, the first group of students that we had in 2019, we had 13 of them graduate, and all of them graduated with honors, thanks to in part to the volunteer program. And they have told us many times, even as if they've gone off to college, that it made them feel purposeful. They felt like they were a bigger part of something. It gave them other ideas of what they'd like to do. But volunteers come to us in every aspect. One of the things that I always say is that we will accept volunteer ages 14 to 114. And we've gotten volunteers from all walks of life with different disabilities in different ways. I go ahead and tell volunteers doing training that we've gotten a volunteer. I test drove a car. I had my badge on. We started a conversation. He is now one of our volunteers. You never know where you're going to get people, and they will say that volunteering has changed me because I see things differently. We had a college student that came. He was working on his doctorate and needed some hours, volunteer hours. And so he said, I used to be afraid to go kayaking, and I was afraid to do this. He said, but I started sitting with patients and realizing that life is short and it needs to be fuller for me. So he started doing more and planning more. People will say, I love getting out of the house, even, it's a couple hours. I look forward to this. I come in and I get to talk to some people, and it's amazing. There are some retired folks that come to us and their kids have said, get out and do something. And they're like, and sometimes, hospice may be an afterthought, but they'll talk to a friend who is a volunteer. Word of mouth is our greatest asset. And they'll say, this is wonderful. And no, you don't have to do just this, or you don't have to do just that. There are so many opportunities, and they let you choose what you want to do. It's not like you walk in and we say, hey, this is what you're going to do today. once the training process, is over, which we'll discuss, we do an interview. What are your likes, dislikes? You're allergic to things. Do you want to not go in a house that has pets or smoking so, we cover all those aspects, and they appreciate that. They appreciate the time that they can give to others. It just makes them feel, I think a good word for that somebody once said was, it makes me feel genuine. And I thought that was a really good statement.
Right. And Danielle, when you speak about your experience, you literally light up. And I get the sense that your cup is filled through your volunteering. And I wonder if you were going to tell somebody, not specifically about AthoriCare Collective, but just being a volunteer, what has it added to your life? What does it add to your life that maybe you hadn't expected or you hadn't really considered when you started, as you said, sort of being assigned to our organization?
Yes, for me, volunteering at hospice is part of my healing journey. Still is. We know with grief, it's not a time limit on it. We wish it's the expiration date on grief, but we know that grief, I call her she. She comes and she goes. So part of my healing from the passing of my husband, becoming a very young single mother at the age of 31, my child at the time, she was 9. I didn't know how to live life. I didn't know how to function and to have a sense of fulfillment. So throughout my counseling, throughout volunteering, I was able to pour into AthoriCare the way that AthoriCare poured into me and my family. And that was very important for me, where I serve from a place of gratitude. And I tell people, if you are going to volunteer, it should be something that you're very passionate about, that you don't look at it as a burden, that, I'm grateful and appreciative. Again, I don't have enough money, enough thank yous to give out to AthoriCare for all the many things that they have done for my family. And I think about that in my volunteer services, where, this is my way of saying thank you. And I'm able to connect with families that are currently going through the same thing that I went through 10 years ago. And I'm able to provide some level of support.
Mm-hmm. And I think about, for many years, my mother loved to crochet and knit. And so there was a local hospital close to where she lived. And once a week she would go and spend the morning knitting and crocheting, lap blankets and baby hats. And I think your point of combining your passion with what your volunteer choice is a very lovely one, because it is making use of, an existing interest, a passion, a desire to give back to a particular organization. And then it elevates not just you, but then those who are around you. And I want to particularly go back to, you said when the doctor initially mentioned hospice services, and we know that communities of color are underserved by hospice in general across the country. And we want our volunteer pool to reflect our community. And I think that you being a volunteer with us, I wonder if you could speak to, within your personal community, did people say, why would you want to do that? Or talk to us a little bit about how you've been able to help others understand your passion and your reason for doing this work, and how well it has been accepted, so that we can have a volunteer pool that truly reflects our community.
Yes, there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to AthoriCare. Of course, when you express that, hey, I volunteer at AthoraCare Hospice, people have very wild views in of my surrounding family and community as far as what that is. And I'm like, wait, hold up. Like, you think it's just a place that, people go and transition? And they're like, yes, why would you want to do that? And for me, throughout these years, I feel like I'm the secret spokesperson for AthoraCare, where I talk about, you know, that hospice, they have services that's for free. Okay. Hospice can also, support you in this capacity. And a lot of people like, well, I didn't know that. For years I heard this, or it's that negative feeling of we're giving up. And I felt the same way too. So I do sympathize with, people in my community when, you say, hey, I'm not for sure. When they say, hey, I'm not for sure about, hospice or AthoraCare. And I tell them that, you know what, I'm going to tell you about my experience. I share my experience. And I tell them, if you have additional questions, call. And when you do call, guess who's going to pick up the phone? A volunteer. Guess who can come and support you? A volunteer. And I talk about the many different volunteers that supported me to make this happen, as far as the care of my family. And afterwards, the holiday cards that were, sent out to my family, they were sent out because of a volunteer. And I talk about the magnitude of that work and how it can greatly impact your family after a traumatic event, such as the passing of, a personal loved one. So throughout these years, I feel like I'm advocating, I'm informing, I'm explaining, these are the different things, but I'm also redirecting as well. Like, hey, if you don't believe me, call hospice, call AthoraCare. And people talk about how they see this building on the corner, and, I just ride right past it. And I was one of those people too, but, I try my best to educate people, because again, teaching is one of my passions, and being able to explain the different opportunities and the volunteer services is important, because I understand that there are families that are currently in need and that can benefit from your services. And I love how Teresa talked about earlier, you can bake a cake. Like, you don't think about that, but how many people do we know that can bake a nice cake? I love a red velvet cake, but if someone can bake a homemade red velvet cake and that's your specialty, oh my goodness, you can really help out a lot of families with your gift.
That's beautiful. And you're so right about being an ambassador. I think it is oftentimes, people hearing directly from a volunteer about your volunteer experience makes it less, daunting, less threatening somehow. And it says, well, if Danielle could do it, I could do it. And again, that energy and excitement, because clearly you receive as much, if not more, as you give in the work that you do as a volunteer. And you are correct about sharing information about our services. I will say there are charges associated with our services, although they are generally covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or other insurance, and we work with everyone, no matter what someone's financial status is. And so, yes, the addition of the volunteers then add such rich opportunity. And one of those, Teresa, and I know that we are post-COVID working on populating and growing our volunteer services program. We think about our volunteer veteran program. We know that a large percentage of people in our community have given of themselves through service. And we know that oftentimes a veteran is most comfortable telling their story to another veteran. And maybe you could speak a little bit about our Vet to Vet program that we have as one option for people to think about when they might consider being a volunteer.
Yes. It's very important that we have veteran volunteers because they understand maybe that frame of mind, and that let's talk or not talk, or know how to get somebody to open up that may have that something in common with them. Our Vet to Vet program is veterans helping veterans. We have the coffees once a month, and ThorCare Collective is a 5-star We Honor Veterans organization. And we take pride in that. So we always have somebody on volunteer services that is in a part of that committee, so that we can be connected to the community and the things that we do. And we have found that when we receive a request for a veteran, the first thing we do is look for our vet volunteers. In addition to our regular training, we do have some additional training for our veterans, just so that they understand how important this is to us and how important it is that they do what they do. And a great example that we had was there was a movie, I believe it was called Dunkirk, if I'm remembering that correctly. And this veteran, all he wanted to do was go see it. So we asked one of our veterans, would you be interested in taking this person to see the movie? And so they did. They went and saw it together, and he said they ended up sitting in the theater for 20-30 minutes after, just talking about different things, and he let him say what he needed to say, and he was just so appreciative, not only that he was a volunteer and did it out of the goodness of his heart, but that he was also a vet, sitting with a vet, and that was very meaningful to him.
So when you mentioned the veteran coffees, if I'm remembering correctly, we have a volunteer who leads an opportunity for veterans to gather, and that's another opportunity. So tell us a little bit about those informal gatherings for veterans led by one of our veteran volunteers.
Yes, he's one of our very own, and it is the first Wednesday of the month that he leads those. If anybody wants information, I can actually send that out if you want to contact me. But he has different sponsors. They may sponsor a coffee donut, they may sponsor a breakfast, but they have a speaker that comes in and talks about different things that are related to veterans. He's a great resource. He's always got resource books for our veterans, and to take care of them, and he understands their needs because he's a veteran himself.
Mm-hmm. So I'm interested, Teresa, in the years that you have been working with us, first as a volunteer coordinator and now in your director role. I know that you have heard from many volunteers about how their life has been changed because of their work as a volunteer. And we know that COVID sort of interrupted the volunteer work, not only at our organization, but at many other volunteer sites. And if you could talk a little bit about now, as we're trying to rebuild, and the benefits for all of us to consider volunteering at any organization as we're moving into this space of getting re-involved, and it can be exciting and it can be a little bit difficult.
It can. Pre-COVID, we didn't have any of these thoughts or worries or what we were going to do, or masks or all this hand sanitizer. And coming out of COVID, it did look a little different. And, volunteers, gave family more thought. They moved away, or they, settled. They were afraid to leave home. And things like that. So one of the things that we had to do was make them feel comfortable, let them know how important the volunteers are to our families. It's not just, it's your presence. It's strictly your presence that's so important to what we do. And people started to say as they came out that it was like a breath of fresh air. They got to leave the house and it gave them something to do. And rather than just sit home and, and be inside your own thoughts, so to speak, it gave them that purpose and that center. They came back and at first we did little projects and things to get them going. We all wore our masks and we were careful about our hands. And now that's all opened up. And as we bring volunteers in, we actually just had a couple of trainings, and they're more open to things, not as held back and not as worried. We try to cover everything we can and make them feel comfortable, wanted, and mainly we want them to understand how very important volunteers are. As we go through this and we talk about the different disciplines, it's very important to understand that a volunteer is actually requested. You're wanted there. The social worker thinks of you and the family says that's a great idea, and they invite you into their home. We have different things that you can do. We also have the thrift store. They have people that come in and sort things, and some of our volunteers have been there for years, and we need drivers to help with the trucks. We need the strong backs to help with all the great donations that we get. Some people leave their entire estate to us, which is so wonderful because it benefits us.
Thank you. And mentioning the diversity of the volunteer pool, and I want to circle back to you, Danielle, which is, I think many people might think of a volunteer as I would think of my mother, who was, in her 70s and 80s, and, an older retired female. And you are somebody who works, you're a mother. Why do you find time to volunteer? You must be busy anyway.
Well, I will say this, with the teen program that I was volunteering with hospice, it was maybe one evening out the month. And I think we started right at 6 or 6:30. So it gave me enough time to get off work, to get something to eat, decompress, and prepare. It didn't take a lot out of me. And that's one of the things that I love about the volunteer opportunities with AthoraCare, because you can select different things to fit your schedule. It's not necessarily a retirement community. It shouldn't be that way, because there are so many things that, again, from age 14 to 114, that people can benefit from the different volunteer opportunities that are hosted or held at AthoraCare. So for me, looking at one night out the month, I was like, okay, I could do that. I spend plenty of time in Target just roaming the aisle, doing nothing. Why not, devote that hour and a half to 2 hours to something that I'm very passionate about, giving back. Again, I operate in the spirit of gratitude for everything that AthoraCare has done for me. So it wasn't a burden. And that's the beautiful thing. Even with the activities that we did with the teenagers, we were able to learn about different aspects and departments and the functions and structures of AthoraCare, along with being able to, engage in activities. It wasn't just to sit and get, and it wasn't a heavy burden. It wasn't that, well, at least in my case, I know, Teresa, you said we need some heavy bags for the store, but in our case, it was one of those things where we're packing snack bags, we're collecting goods, we're learning and meeting very special people throughout the organization. So for me, it was like, I can devote this time. Another thing that also motivated and encouraged me were the students. The students were very highly motivated in getting those service learning hours here in the local school district. And so they would even ask, hey, can we, do this to help, get, at least 2 hours of time throughout the month or more opportunities. But through that process, they began to, love and enjoy their volunteer work with hospice. Now, it could be a struggle, but I will say this also. With AthoriCare, they will make for sure to provide some type of snack for you, and that is always helpful when you are coming from work or activity, and you need to, be at AthoriCare to volunteer. You never go hungry.
Well, and I think you are fed in other ways also, right?
Yes.
Your soul is fed and your heart is fed. And I think that when we think about those 14-year-olds, introducing that concept of service leadership, of giving back. And Teresa, if we think about volunteerism in terms of that wellness feature, you made a passing reference that it could help our blood pressure. But I mean, the reality is that many people have a richer life because they do volunteer. And if we can help people at a younger age, if we can help, bring underserved communities into our volunteer pool, if we can bring more men and not only women, so our male patients might have male companionship if that is what they are looking for, that aspect of personal wellness that can be really recognized when we volunteer.
Right, absolutely. And when they start off, even as a teen, I think right away they feel that different sense of themselves as they're spending this time either with each other or with a patient. And one of the things that we've done, even with the teen program, is said, you have this opportunity now, but you can stay to be an adult volunteer. It's not like this is going to end for you. And this past year, we actually had 2 that graduated and they've gone off to college for a year, but as they've come back to do more, they've come back to us to be volunteers. So that let us know that not only did they appreciate that time, but we were their first thought, whether they needed hours or that sense of purpose for themselves. They came back to us, and that meant a lot to us. There's so much that volunteers can go through in their personal lives. This might even be, in a sense, something that they do for themselves, as Danielle did, where it helped her heal. This could be something where, they say, I just need this break, or I just don't know what to do with myself. And there's so much going on in my life. But once you walk in the door, regardless of what you're doing, you're helping someone else, and it helps you maybe forget about yourself for a little while. And that may be where some of that wellness comes in. As you actually transition some of the care that you're trying to give to yourself that you can give to others.
Yes.
And so when we think about, we've made mention of many different volunteer opportunities at AthoriCare Collective. And when we think about, I know, Danielle, you have mentioned, working with students. We know that there are some volunteers who are not wanting to be directly working with the patient population. And we have many opportunities in the administrative, in the fundraising, in the, different special project opportunities. And then we do have those patient volunteers. And Teresa, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, we know that hospice started as a volunteer organization. And so our patients, the benefit that they get and their caregivers by having that volunteer walk into either the room at the facility or into the house or into one of our inpatient hospice units. What is it that the volunteers do? You said presence, and I think that's the primary thing that we're doing, but we're also giving relief to that caregiver, and we're maybe reading a book, where what are we doing when we might be visiting with a patient?
That's a great question. And I actually had a volunteer come back to me one day and said that he went to the facility to visit, and the wife said, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, hospice sent me." And she said, No, that's not what I'm asking. She said, "Why are you here?" And he said for a minute he was taken aback because he didn't quite know how to answer that. But when he thought of it for just a second, and his simple answer was, "Because I want to be here." And he said the look on her face it wasn't even a smile. It was just that glow in her eye, as if somebody was saying, "I'm here and it's okay." So when they go in and they're sitting with a patient, or they're going into a facility, at first it could be a little intimidating, because you are going, the very first visit only, you're going to see a stranger, but they're only a stranger for the first couple seconds. You introduce each other, you know why you're there. There's this presence of, "I want to be here and I'm here for you," and they know that. And before the volunteer even gets there, the social worker explains what our services are and what they do and what that means. And the patient and family know, whether they're in the IPU at home or at the facility, they know that you're coming there because you accepted that request and you want to be there. So immediately it's a feeling of, "Thank you so much." And when we call the family, when we're setting up this assignment, we're checking their likes, don't likes, do you have pets in the home, that type of thing. And sometimes they'll say, "I haven't been out of the house in 6 months. You don't know how much I appreciate this." Or we sit with a patient and all he wanted to do was be able to go out and mow the lawn. And just that being in the house, sitting with the wife, allowing him to do that, is just that just cannot be replaced by anybody except a volunteer.
Right. And our volunteers, I mean, we often say that our volunteers are unpaid staff, and we say that because our volunteers go through very thorough vetting and orientation. So we're not just walking into either our office or walking into a home without having good training. Danielle, I imagine you remember your volunteer training and connected with the other volunteers probably as well.
Yes, absolutely. But the training is very well needed. For me, I was shocked at the amount of information that goes into training. So you're not pushed out there to the wolves. Like, you are very well supported throughout the process of volunteering. I think I still have my binder. Like, I remember we had the binder, and the binder, it was filled to capacity with different information and scenarios. So I was very appreciative of that experience, because I got the network. I got to learn about other services, and again, just the expanded, part of the campus. I didn't realize for a long time that hospice is more than just one building. It's like this miniature college campus that sits on the corner here of Summit. I think it's Cone. Is it Cone? Well, the intersecting street, but I know Summit for sure. But yes, I'm very appreciative of the amount of training and support and the reassurance that you can actually do things that you are passionate about. It's not one of those things where we're going to put you over here. You can say that I don't feel comfortable with doing X, Y, and Z. And let me tell you, Miss Teresa, she will find an opportunity for you some way, somehow, to make it work for your schedule and also for your comfort level.
Right. And so when you talk about Summit Avenue, you're talking about our Greensboro campus. Yes. And we know that we have our Burlington campus. And Teresa, we have volunteer training opportunities for people throughout our service area. And I wonder if you were, to say, After we finish our webinar today, I want to be a volunteer. What happens? What do I do?
Okay, great question. So post-COVID, we had to give a little more thought to what people were doing. They're working, they're moms. You know, they can't come during the day, or you know, they have great intentions, but it just doesn't work out. So the first thing that you need to do is email or call us for an application, and we also send you the slideshow for our information session. Now, we feel that that information session is so important that until you review it and return your application, you don't receive the dates for our training. We don't publicize those because we want the best of the best, so to speak. We want to know that people are dedicated, that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and that they're going to provide good care for our patients, whether they're in an office or sitting with them. So once you return the application and receive those dates, we let you know that we are going to run a background check for the safety of all our staff, patients, families, and other volunteers. And then after that, we're going to confirm that you'll be at the training, and we will print off manuals. So the manual contains all the paperwork that you need to sign. It has all of the presentations that you're going to see. It has the written that goes with the presentations, maybe a little extra dress code or policy here and there. And we do have a section for our Kids Path, Beacon Place and Hospice Home, and our Vet to Vet volunteers. Our training is now a hybrid setting. So you will come in and meet us face to face because we feel that that is so important. I do go to every training for every session because you will be assigned to a volunteer coordinator. So that may be the only time we get to work together, but I make sure that I'm at all the trainings so that I get to meet you and get to know you. We have 2 sessions. We have 2 in-person presentations. One of those presentations is our social work presentation because that is it's long, but there's also an activity that the director does with the volunteers. It's very meaningful, and that's not something we want to change to virtual at all. And then in the second session, you will have a presentation from us at Volunteer Services. We talk about what you can expect. We explain that we're sorry for all this paperwork, but it's a Medicare requirement. And in between those 2 sessions, they are 2 Tuesdays or 2 Thursdays, we email you presentations from other disciplines. You have time to review those, go through your manual, write down any questions for us, and give us feedback. We appreciate the feedback because it tells us what we need to update and what we need to do, which is how we came up with this hybrid schedule. On the second, after we do our presentation, we collect all your paperwork, and then we give you the form to go take your TB test if you're going to be a patient-facing volunteer. And we talk to you a little bit about what you'd like to do. We do take a picture for your badge. We let you know what day we're going to take the picture so you can make sure that hair is done. And then, in essence, you graduate, so to speak. And so once we get everything back and get your file in order, we order your badge, and then we ask you to come in. We do a short competency just to make sure you understood the training. You're ready to go see a patient. And in between that time, we send out an interview, which we do by the SurveyMonkey company. And we ask you, what's your availability? Do you have any allergies? Do you have any likes, dislikes? What would you like to do? But in your paperwork, we also have a job description where you'll initial the things that you're interested in, so we can get a pretty good idea of who your volunteer coordinator is going to be and where we can put you and how that's going to work for you. But we make sure that you're comfortable along the way. I also want to make sure that everybody knows that we do make accommodations for disabilities. We're extremely proud of all of our volunteers, regardless. We have some of our best volunteers are our disabled vets. We can accommodate wheelchairs at our facilities, anything that we need to do to get you in. And anybody that can complete the training and sign their paperwork can be a volunteer, as long as they're 14 and older. And our teens have been exceptional this past year. We even have a teen that likes to do laundry, if you can imagine that. And that's available at our hospice home. So all of our volunteers have done a great job. The past 2 trainings that we have been the new hybrid schedule. And for the first time, we've had 100% attendance rate at both of the trainings on both campuses. So we think this hybrid schedule is really going to work well.
Okay.
Thank you. I think it's so important when we think about volunteering that we know that we're going to receive that training. There's always somebody that we can call if we have a question, we have a concern. I know that there's ongoing education that our volunteers get to participate in, just as our staff does. And we know that really the volunteers, we always say, are the heart of hospice, and very much are a part of us, but yet are there because of that strong desire. And Danielle, as we're coming to the end of our time together, I wonder if you were going to do that 30-second elevator speech about why somebody should want to volunteer anywhere. What is that 30-second elevator speech of why I want to be a volunteer?
All right. You should become a volunteer with AuthoriCare, because let me tell you, you can never go wrong by pouring into people. One of the most precious things that hospice deals with is the transitioning of a person's life, and to be able to be part of that beautiful transition, that journey to a family. It is a very beautiful thing to be able to support people that are in need. For me, 10 years ago, the people that stand out to me are the volunteers. I remember the volunteer that visit the home so I could wash the dishes. I just needed someone to sit with my husband at the time. I remember the volunteer that offered homework support while sitting there with my daughter because she wanted my attention as well. I remember those people, and those people will forever be in my heart. So it's a great opportunity to give back, a great opportunity to support families in need, to help them through this precious, precious transition, and to also embrace the unknown, and to renew whatever that you're dealing with in your life, as far as, understanding what is your true purpose, almost your inner work that you're doing for yourself, as well. So with hospice, you're winning, and the families are winning as well.
That is absolutely beautiful. I want to thank both of you for so eloquently speaking about volunteerism and what it is to be a volunteer, what we receive as a volunteer, and what we can give. We know that we will be sending out for everybody who registered for this webinar. Tomorrow, there'll be an email going out that will have some resources, including our website, if you'd like to be in touch about being a volunteer. It will also have a recording of today's webinar if you want to share it with anyone. And if anybody has any questions, you can just respond back to that email, and I will direct your question appropriately. So I want to thank you, Danielle, and thank you, Teresa. I want to thank our participants, and I want to draw your attention to our website. We will be having our next webinar focusing on veterans. As we move towards November, we want to put our focus and give our attention to our veteran population. So stay tuned for information on that. And as we close today, I want to share a quote by Helen Keller. And it says, the unselfish effort to bring cheer to others will be the beginning of a happier life for ourselves. So thank you and have a good rest of the day.